Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast where we explore mental health one story at a time. Today, we are talking about something that gets tossed around a lot: happiness. What it is, what it isn't, and why so many of us feel like we're supposed to have it, but can't quite figure out how. Most of us have been taught that happiness is something you earn, that it's the reward for checking all the right boxes: a steady job, a good relationship, maybe a few vacations, a house if you're lucky. And if you've done all that and you still feel off, still feel low, frustrated, disconnected, or just numb, it's easy to think the problem is you. But that's not the whole story, and that's exactly what we're unpacking in this episode. My guest is Peter Teuscher. He's a life coach and the author of Rethinking Happiness, and he's got a very grounded approach to what happiness really means. He's not here to push toxic positivity or tell you just to smile through the pain. He's been through depression, he's done the inner work, and he's helped a lot of other people figure this out for themselves. This conversation isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about getting honest with yourself. Because sometimes the hardest part of the mental health journey isn't surviving the low points. It's feeling like you should be fine, but you're still not. And we don't talk about that enough. Peter and I get into how happiness isn't a final destination. It's not about chasing perfect circumstances or some imaginary life where nothing hurts. It's about whether your life actually lines up with your values, your needs, and your truth. A lot of the time, we don't even realize we're chasing someone else's version of happiness. What we saw growing up, what society tells us is success, what we think we're supposed to want. We also talk about why people sometimes sabotage their own happiness, even when they don't mean to. How trauma, chronic stress, pain, or mental illness can make joy feel out of reach. And why it's not your fault, but it is something you can work with once you start paying attention to your habits, your environment, your mindset, and the stories you're telling yourself. This episode is especially for anyone who's ever thought, I've got a lot to be grateful for, so why don't I feel good? Or maybe happiness just isn't for people like me. I've been there. Peter's been there. And we are both here to say it's not about forcing joy. It's about finding a way to stop fighting yourself and start building something that actually fits you. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Peter on Rethinking Happiness. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I am really excited for our conversation today. I think it's going to be a really great one. I am joined today by Peter Teuscher. He is a life coach with a really thoughtful take on what happiness actually means. He is the author of Rethinking Happiness, where he talks about moving past surface level ideas and really getting into what it means to find happiness on your own terms. He brings a unique mix of experience to the table, from coaching basketball to working in corporate leadership to launching businesses. And these days he works with people from all walks of life, including top executives, helping them tap into their potential and make meaningful change. I'm really excited for this conversation today because we're going to talk about how we define happiness, what gets in the way of happiness, and how we can all kind of start approaching that a little bit differently. So, Peter, thank you for just agreeing to join us today. I'm so excited for this.
Thanks. It's great to be with you. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. For those who are here with us today live, we do have a question queue open. If you have any questions for Peter while we are here, feel free to pop those into the question queue and we will get them answered. I do have some social links for you guys. So if you are looking to connect with Peter, feel free to pop onto any of these. I've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all kinds of different ones. We were talking about socials ahead of this and just how there's always a new one out there. So it's always great. Leach and Rose, I see you both here. Thank you so much for being here. You're here early, on time, all that good stuff. Always love that. Feel free to pop any questions in. We do already have a question in by Rose. Rose would like to know, do you or your partner crochet or knit?
We do not. I don't have a lot of room in my life for extra hobbies at the moment, but maybe something. Actually, funny enough, my wife's daughter does. She's just started kind of knitting and crochet and sewing, and it's kind of her thing. But she's only 11.
Oh, I love that. That's a great time to start because I don't know if you get these, but they have those little kits of like you can make a capybara and it gives you all the instructions on how to make this little creature and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, 11 is a great time to start something like that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, she's just at an age where she'll try something for a bit and then move on to the next thing. So we'll see if it sticks.
That's okay. Some of them won't. But I can tell you from personal experience that sometimes you'll come back to it later as an adult. You'll
Sure.
come back to it and be like, oh, I used to really love making whatever, well, these little crochet creatures, and I'm going to try that again now. So that's great. Can you share a little bit about what led you to focus so deeply on happiness in your work?
Absolutely. Well, it was quite a long journey. I've had my own personal development journey for the last 25 years, and in my late 20s, early 30s, I really kind of hit a low point in terms of recognizing that I'd been suffering from depression since
Mm,
childhood. So I when I finally realized what depression was, I started going for therapy and really embarked consciously on my personal development journey. And so I guess I came to the point where I thought, well, if I can do this, anybody can do it. And I really, through changing a lot of the way I think and believe, I was able to just go from really struggling to find any kind of a joy in my life to having a very fulfilling, very positive, happy life. And so that's just something I wanted to pass on. And I just found that throughout my career, the different things working in the corporate world, but also getting into coaching, I realized it was just such a foundational piece of people's success and fulfillment was just finding ways to be happy in everything that they do. So that was the main influence.
the idea that you kind of took this of if I can do this, anyone can do it, and really kind of put it into that perspective of, and then take that next step and say, I'm going to help other people do it. I think that's something that's really cool because if you could see something and be like, oh yeah, I was able to do this. Surely anyone could do it. That's one take of just like anybody could do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, and they'll figure it out, right? But you took it that next step. So is that something that you just kind of took that inspiration and ran with it? Did it take time to do that? Was there kind of a gap period in there?
For sure. When I think my first thought of coaching, well, actually, I didn't even know what coaching in the way that I do it was, but when I was starting to sort of, find my new way of seeing the world and living and so on, among all the other things I was doing for myself, I started to volunteer to coach basketball. And so and it was, I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and so I decided to go to sort of the more difficult part of the city and sort of a high school that a lot of other coaches didn't want to go to. But I found those kids. Well, I coached from I had 15-year-olds, 17, 18, but I always found that. Being able to give something back to them and mentor them in some way, and everything that I was just learning on the process of learning, I was teaching to them, and it anchored it further in me. And so that was when I after those couple of years of doing that, I thought, wow, I wonder if I could do this for a living. And then I didn't come back to that until I'd moved over to Europe. I'd been in the sort of in the corporate world, and then I started to sort of get coached myself and realized it was something that I'd like to learn to do myself, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. But the I always came back to this theme of happiness and what does it mean, because for me, just coming through years of depression made me realize that happiness is something that a lot of people strive for and are looking for in different ways. They just aren't quite sure how to get there, or they haven't really thought so much about what it means to them, and they kind of take these cultural or societal cues on what it is and what it means, and that's where I thought I have something to offer and give to others that could help them on their journey. And along with that, I continued to learn, right? So I continued to grow, and I think that was that personal growth and helping others and passing it on to others was what drove me along the whole process.
That's wonderful. And I saw Rose asked what inspired you to become a life coach. So I think you kind of summed it up right there as well. But was there anything else that went into the inspiration for this particular path?
Yeah, I'd taken a number of different courses to see, how does this sit
Mm.
with me? Do I think I could be good at this? Do I have something to add value to others? And then when I finally got certified as a systemic coach, that's when through that process, the one of the trainers actually approached me and said, "Hey, listen, with your corporate background and your and now this coaching, there's lots of work out there." And he helped kind of get me in the door. And so I started at first, initially I thought, well, I would get into the life coaching, but suddenly I realized there's lots of other life coaches out there. And so I didn't focus on one or the other. Working systemically, you can apply that to people in their personal lives and in the workplace. And I realized just because you're coaching someone on a business level, the personal life always comes into it.
Yeah.
We've talked about people's relationships, marriages, all that stuff. And I realized so much of what's happening in our private lives and our level of happiness and fulfillment affects how successful we are in life. And so, there's no separating the two, and so, I think when I realized, I guess to go back to the question, when I realized that I had something of value to give, that's when I really went for it in a more committed, focused way.
Yeah. I really want to dig into kind of like that definition of happiness and everything. But before we get there today, I would love to know if you have a true crime story that fascinates you.
Um, Actually, it's an interesting one. The first thing that comes to mind is it's quite a sad story, but I don't know if you remember Jean-Benet Ramsey, the
Oh,
little girl
yeah.
who was like the beauty pageant queen,
Hmm.
and the whole invested. Her parents were suspected, and so on. And I just thought it was a story that yeah, I don't watch a ton of news, but it was a story that I really got wrapped up in because it's just so sad at that age and how heartbreaking that story was. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's one. There's a Netflix documentary on right now about John Benet Ramsey, and I like watching true crime documentaries and that kind of thing. My 18-year-old has picked up on that as well, and so I'll be sitting here. He gets home pretty early. He's a senior in high school, so he gets home pretty early. He doesn't have a whatever his last period is, and so he'll put something on the TV. Well, the TV's right outside of my office. And so I'll hear him watching something like, "What are you watching?" And the other day he said, "Oh, it's this documentary about this little girl." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
what little girl? What little girl are we talking about right now?" And it was John Benet Ramsey. I'm like, "Oh, that was heartbreaking." Like, oh, that
Yeah.
whole story, absolutely heartbreaking. And it's not solved, right? Like they still don't have an
Yeah.
actual answer. That's something that uh that's something that really kind of gets to me is there's no answer, and at this point we aren't likely to have an answer. Although,
No.
to be fair, they did just like find some DNA evidence about Jack the Ripper. So who knows? Like that's way back.
Way
So
back.
yeah, so I mean, there's always new developments and always new technologies coming out that could help with things like this. But especially in that case, it's just there's so much missing information, so many missing pieces that
Yeah.
it's unlikely to get an answer for that. But yeah, it's a fascinating story, and there is a great documentary on Netflix right now. I'm sure there are plenty of others too, but
Okay.
it's a good one.
Interesting. Maybe I'll have to pick it up again and see where the story went.
Not far. Unfortunately, not far, but that's one of those things. If you can stomach watching information that isn't all the way developed and all the way out there, it is a good documentary. I do recommend it.
Okay.
So, getting back to our topic tonight, how do you define happiness, and has that definition changed for you over time, especially given everything that you went through that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to point out that for very deep topics like love, happiness, it's a lot of definitions or trying to sum it up really just kind of points to an answer. Sometimes it's really difficult to put it into words, but I think the definition or the way I look at it now is happiness. I see as part of our sort of emotional guidance system. It's for me, happiness is just the feedback that tells us whether the way we're living is on track with our deeper needs, our core values. It's when we're making choices that are on track with sort of those inner needs, then we feel happy. And or the other piece of that is, the way we are looking at the world will affect, the level of happiness that we have. And so when you happiness is in the moment. So it's not like a lot of people think of happiness as in terms of these goals. And you asked me about how it's changed for me over time. When I went through periods of depression, I didn't think happiness was possible for me. And then
Hmm.
when I started to change, I thought I had the if, when, then kind of a thought that, when I have the right relationship, when I have the career that I want. But, I started a business with my brother, and it was like kind of this dream for us. And we got it going. And then, and the thing was, this was in our 20s. It was a lot of people thought we had this dream life. And then still I was going home sad and
Mm.
unhappy and unfulfilled, and that made me feel even more guilty about it because I had no reason, right? And so that's why I think that when you make it a destination, that's the problem. I think there's a lot of times people will live their life with these peak moments, this great vacation or this milestone they've hit, and then everything in between is like filler. And I think that's so sad because you're missing out on so many opportunities for happiness in between. Like there's in every moment of every day, there's a chance for that. And so we'll get into it a little bit more deeply, but I think that's where recognizing that it's not some goal to be achieved or something you're going to work towards for the future. It's something that you either have now or you don't, right? So
Hmm.
does that make sense?
It does. It really does. And you talked about the alignment of, what your ideas are and kind of that happiness piece. Did you ever have a moment where you had to define that alignment for yourself? You had to define those values for yourself and say, this is what matters to me. This is what would make a difference in my life, kind of thing, to help you recognize happiness that was in front of you?
For sure. It took a long time. And I think once I started, getting on the whole personal development journey, and I was learning all these new things, and then I started getting into spirituality and things like that. And then you always think, well, when I reach, I don't know, you might want to call it enlightenment or whatever. Now I don't believe in, achieving that. I think that it's just this ongoing process. And so when you realize that it's not this. It's not this place you'll get to and then you'll be happy, because
Mm-hmm.
I certainly still have my highs and lows like everybody else. I just they're not as extreme. And when I am in a state where I'm feeling a bit down, I have all the tools to get myself back in that state. And that helps me live a life, for one, that for me feels happier, and I think it puts me in a space where I can give more to others. And I think that's why it's such an important topic for me as well.
Yeah. I know you talked about the coaching and kind of getting into corporate leadership and how that just sort of flowed into one another and everything. Were there just points along the way, or was there anything specific at any of those moments that helped you kind of shape your views of happiness and how it ties to mental well-being?
Um, yeah, well, mental health is something that didn't know anything about when I was in my 20s. And I remember hearing this public service announcement on the radio saying, if you're experiencing, and they gave a list of symptoms, you may be suffering from depression. I thought, wow, there's a name for how I feel.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, and yeah, and so, and it just made me realize that, your state and the way you see the world when you're depressed, it's really difficult to see any kind of opportunities, any good things in your future. And then having that contrast in my life, I think that was the big difference. When you look back and you realize how far you've come, and you recognize that other people could be suffering in the same way, or maybe they're not depressed, but their life events have put them in a position where they don't see all the opportunities or they just haven't done the work to look at their own core values, and recognize the things that actually do make them happy. I think that's where I realized that I had a lot to give to others, and so for me, the thing that changed my life the most was recognizing the beliefs that were holding me back and the negative thinking habits that kept me looking at life from a very negative perspective, and then also kept me in a very negative and limiting state. And I think learning to overcome those was something that made me feel so empowered. And I went through a lot of those years feeling like a victim because I thought there was something wrong with my brain. I thought there was, I'd just been dealt this, these bad cards. And then when I realized, I don't have to be a victim. And I realized that seeing myself that way really was disempowering. And then when I realized I have the ability to change, and I'm the only one who can make that change, and from that to create a happy life for myself, I think that's when I realized, wow, this stuff really works, and I can. And then when I started to, even like I said, when I was passing on some of the personal development stuff to some of the kids I was coaching in basketball, and some of them really resonated with it, I realized, oh, okay, this is something that feels right. And then it still took me years to discover how to really apply it and help people in a bigger way. So I hope that answers your question. It feels like it was a roundabout way of getting there, though.
We're here for rambling and roundabout. It's fine. It's all good. That's what we're here for. We're here for the story. So it's all good.
Excellent.
You talked about the being in your 20s and not really understanding mental health and everything. I was definitely there back in my 20s as well. And I think that was very common. And the thing that makes me really hopeful for the future is that now my 11-year-old and my 18-year-old, they already know so much about this is not good for my mental health. This is not protecting myself. These are things to look out for. Like it's so much, it's got such a broader reach into today's teenagers and young people. I am so hopeful that their lives are going to be way better than ours possibly were because of that, just with that awareness.
And I think it's so great that, when I was experiencing this, and even when I was first getting therapy and so on, I didn't talk to anyone, not even my closest friends knew about what I was experiencing because it was still fairly stigmatized. I think it's really encouraging that people talk openly about it now. Even, celebrities are talking about their, experiences with depression or mental health issues and anxiety and that sort of thing. So I think that the dialogue is what's really going to help us as a society move forward and recognize the things that we're doing to undermine our own mental well-being.
Most definitely. For sure. Yeah. And you mentioned core values, and I know that we talked about kind of that values alignment earlier. And this is something that we've had questions on this channel before, and we kind of get some either good resources that were pointed to, or like just kind of go find your own way sort of thing. But the question that's come up before is, how do you identify those core values? How do you figure out what your core values are? Do you have any sort of exercise that you normally point people to for that?
Absolutely. I use it in workshops, and I use it in personal coaching. There are some online kind of, you can do a test to, they'll get you to pick between different ideas, words, and they'll come up with your sort of top 5 or whatever. I find a really great way. What I do with my clients is I'll have Post-its, and I'll get them to write a value on every Post-it, and we'll put them on the wall or on the window. And I try to get them to come up with at least 25, 30, but if not more. And then what we do is we get them to slowly start pulling those values off. to the point where it feels uncomfortable, where it was like, oh, I'm really struggling to take this one off. And so some people really struggle to get it down to 10, but if you can get it down to 5, that will really help you hone in on what your core values are. And but if I wouldn't go for more than 10. But if you don't have those Post-its or that as a resource, just get a sheet of paper and don't write lists, but write them randomly around the page. Just every value that you can think of, from honesty to courage to, loyalty or whatever, but come up with as many as you can. And then what you can do is start crossing them off one at a time. And when it starts to feel really difficult to go, no, I can't let go of this one, then you're very close there. Just push yourself a little further. But yeah, and by doing that, you can kind of get down to your between 5 and 10 core values. And I find that when people are in a relationship or in a workplace where they are living contrary to their core values, that leads to a lot of unhappiness. You cannot lead a life where you are neglecting most of your core values and then still try to be happy, right? So I think that's such a fundamental piece of this, figuring out what's going to make me happy. And that's why I go back to, happiness is this feedback loop. It's telling you that, there's something that the choices you're making and the way you're living your life is in contrast to those values or these needs that you have.
Yeah. It can be really hard to kind of identify if you just say, oh, just go figure out your core values. But then I do think writing all of those, putting them on Post-its, and I love Post-its. I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stacks of Post-its on my desk right now because they're all different colors, of course.
Yeah, and I think that exercise with the Post-its works really well because you physically have to remove it, right? And as if you're giving it up and you never get back to it again. Obviously, that's metaphorical, but I think for the brain, it really does something. And when you recognize how some of those the values that you've written there, how they resonate with you. I mean, having the physical action along with the thinking process is a really cathartic process, and I think it really helps people.
Yeah, you're right. The physical taking one off is great, but yeah, that's wonderful. I haven't heard of anyone doing it that way, and I really, really like that because you're just like, it's that brainstorming and then editing it down piece that you're just letting your brain throw everything out there and then pulling it back to what really matters to you with thinking. So you're like, just take the thoughts off, write everything down, get it all up there, and then start thinking. I think that's great.
Yeah. It can be helpful. Obviously, I believe in coaching as a coach myself, but even if you have a friend who can kind of, if you're willing to do it with a friend to talk you through it, because sometimes we're not willing to push ourselves as far, come on, there must be one more you can take away or whatever. And it really, forces you to get down to the essence of what your core values are. So yeah, if you have someone that you trust that you want to do that exercise with, that's great. But you can certainly do it on your own.
Yeah, that's cool. That's neat. I wonder what my kids would do with that exercise. I wonder maybe I should have them do it and then wait a year and have them do it again. see how it changes over time, because kids are learning and growing and everything, so theirs are probably going to change a lot more than mine will.
Well, I find that in my years of experience, I find your values don't necessarily change, but you emphasize different ones, right? So when you're younger, maybe freedom might be one that's on your list, but then it becomes as you get older, your emphasis focuses on security or something, and they're not mutually exclusive. So you could have those both in your core values. But as you're younger, you're more focused on one than the other. So I find that over time, it's not that your values change, but you emphasize different ones.
Yeah, that's interesting. Rose has a great question. This is not related to the topic, and I'm assuming it's a question for me, but that is totally welcome and totally fine. Rose says, how do you find your guests? And I love this question because it used to be really difficult for me to find guests. It was me reaching out to individuals and saying hey, please come join me for this conversation. And it was just I reach out to people I think were cool. And I probably had a 25% response rate on that. But now I've gotten to the point where I'm on so many platforms and I reach out to so many people in so many different ways that Peter reached out to me. And so I'm at this point now where I'm okay, I feel really good about the show. I feel really good about what we're doing. And I've got people reaching out to be on the show and to join me. So it's changed a lot over the years. When you're first starting out, if you're considering doing something where you're interviewing people, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do it at first. But over time, you get to this point where, people start reaching out to you. Or when you reach out to someone, they're like, oh, I've heard of that. Yes, I'll join you. So it becomes a different conversation whenever you kind of get that reach a little bit. I love that question. Thank you.
And actually, I used to do this kind of a format with a coaching colleague, and we just had conversations about the coaching topics we thought would be interesting for others. But now I really enjoy having these conversations with different people because it's a little bit different every time. People ask different questions. They bring something else out in me, and so I find getting to know different people and that interactive nature. I think I love that. So anyway.
Yeah, it makes it a lot of fun whenever it's a two-way conversation makes it a lot of fun. Because when I first started the show, I definitely had the times where if I had a guest cancel or something, I would try to just do some research on a topic and do a little bit of a deep dive. First of all, that's a ton of work. And doing the interviews is already a ton of work. But that was like an extra ton of work. It was like doing a book report every week kind of thing. But also it's different whenever you're talking to someone and you can get that immediate feedback and have that conversation and get the different viewpoints. I think it brings a lot of value to do that. So if you are looking to do something and you are looking to find guests, feel free to reach out to me on Discord, and I'm happy to help kind of guide you with what I've done and what I've learned over time. I'd be happy to chat with you for sure. So, Peter, what are some common myths or maybe misconceptions people have about happiness?
Well, I think the most common one, and even when people say, actually, I know it's not this destination, but a lot of people are still, putting happiness somewhere in their future, or they have these expectations for when people get married. It's supposed to be the greatest day of their life. Things like that. I think when you put so much pressure on one particular experience to be this full of joy and happiness, I think that is where people go wrong, because there's so much pressure on that one. And like I said, life is not about these peak moments. It's about finding the happiness in individual moments. And I think a lot of people expect these external conditions to be right before they feel happy. But I always remind people that happiness is this inside job, right? And you can when you can learn to be happy in the most difficult situations, that is when you're on the right track. I love to go back to one book that really inspired me was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very short book, but he talks about his experience, in a concentration camp, as a, when during World War II, and in these atrocious conditions. He describes this moment where in the cold winter day, when the sunbeam reaches his face and he finds this moment of joy and happiness in that moment. I remember reading that, and I thought, if he can do it under those atrocious conditions, anybody can. And that just kind of points to the fact that, it's not this getting everything in your life the way you want it, and then you'll be happy. It's finding a way to find the happiness inside, regardless of the external conditions.
Yeah. It can be really hard to find on some days, though, right? Like,
for sure,
some days it's going to be extraordinarily hard. I am sure there were plenty of days for Viktor Frankl that were incredibly hard to find that meaning and everything.
Of course,
but happiness. I think the thing that I have heard before from some folks is like, I'm not always happy, and of course you're not. You're going to experience a whole range of human emotions. Like that's totally normal and expected, right?
Exactly. And because I think this expectation that you should be as happy as much as possible, I think that in itself creates this expectation that's going to lead to more unhappiness,
Yeah.
because if there's, like I said, for me it's this combination of how I'm living my life and the choices I'm making, or the way I'm seeing the world. And a lot of times we have so much to be thankful for, so much that could make us happy. It's just we're so focused on, this is the thing, this person is supposed to be making me happy,
Mm.
or this job is supposed to be fulfilling me, or yeah, I booked this great vacation and spent so much money on it, and I'm not happy on it, right? So it's these expectations that we put on other things, and then we'll have these moments that are just so simple, being out in nature or watching the sunset, and we don't reflect on, because it's not a peak moment. We don't reflect on the fact that those little moments can be so fulfilling and provide us so much happiness. And if we can anchor in those moments, rather than these big grandiose points of our life where we expect it so much, I think that will help put it in perspective. And we need contrast in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
How will you know if you're happy if you've never been unhappy, right? So, I mean, I've had pretty extreme contrasts in my life, but I think that's all led to making me appreciate when those times are good, when I have those moments, and I think when we can be self-aware enough to recognize, you know, those little things that create joy in our life on a day-to-day basis, that's what I'm trying to point towards, getting into that habit, and the way of seeing life and the world and yourself. I think that's what I'm pointing towards when I'm talking about finding more happiness in your life.
Yeah. I've got a shirt with a quote by Dolly Parton on it that says, if you want to enjoy the rainbow, you got to put up with a little bit of rain." And it is,
Yeah,
it's that contrast of,
love that.
you're not going to 100% of the time be happy. You're going to have to go through some periods where it's not happiness, so that you understand what the happiness means to you. And it's
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. And
mhm.
and this is the thing that I've learned through the coaching, is also, because I wasn't always in coaching. I was looking to help people, find their own highest potential. I mean, that's still generally what I do. But I would have people that would come to me that would say, I've done all these things in my life, and they were at different stages of their life, but sometimes they had a partner and a family and a career, and the finances were okay, and all these things, but they still weren't happy, and
Mhm.
they thought there was something wrong with them, and I said, well, what did you think would make you happy? And they had this checklist that society provides for us, that do these things and that's going to lead to happiness, and they're all external. It's not those internal things that, like understanding your values and so on. And so I think that was such a revealing moment for me, having these people come to me, realizing that, what was making them, part of the reason they were unhappy was that they were following somebody else's checklist for
Mm.
what it meant to be happy. That's why I really encourage other people to define it for themselves. Nobody can tell you what it means to you, in the same way that nobody can tell me how I can experience more happiness. And so I think that's the struggle, that a lot of people are looking for the pill, or the hack, or the quick fix that's going to solve their problems. And it's this process of doing the inner work, and reflecting on the beliefs that you have that are undermining your happiness, the chronic thinking patterns that you have, and then the environment that you create for yourself, right? And so all of those things contribute. It's not just one thing. There's no magic pill. There's no
Mhm.
one thing that you're going to do that's going to, it's the lifestyle you live, and sort of the habits that you integrate into your life that are going to make that happen.
Yeah. Do you ever find that people are afraid of happiness, or that they maybe sabotage their own joy to an extent?
Well, certainly, when you look at some of the beliefs that undermine most people, it will be things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy,
Mm.
right? And so if you're not feeling worthy, then you will certainly do things to undermine your own happiness. And also this sense that putting everyone else ahead of yourself, right? For years I've been talking about when you get on a plane and they give you the safety instructions. It's in the case of loss of crowd pressure, put on your own mask first and then help children and those around you. And the thing is, if you're not taking care of your own happiness, then you will not be in a position you'll not be in the best position to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for me that happiness is such an important topic is because I think that happy people are better. They're better partners. They're better coworkers. They're better citizens. Better parents. When people have found authentic happiness in their lives, they make better choices, and so you have so much more to give. And so I think a lot of some of the most selfish people are just unhappy, and they're making choices that are selfish because they still haven't found their own fulfillment, right? So I think that's such an important point for people to reflect on.
How can someone recognize the difference between, yes, this is true happiness, and going back to what you were saying earlier, oh, that's something that I'm expected to have, or kind of that performative piece of it? How can you tell the difference?
Well, I look at it in terms of authentic happiness, and a lot of people are looking for that kind of hedonistic, pleasurable, those pleasurable moments. Those are the ones that are supposed to make us happy, and a lot of when those are, of course, they're fleeting, right? So just feeling good or having that dopamine hit is not the thing that's going to consistent. That's not the authentic happiness I'm talking about. So when you do the work on the core values, that's one piece. But when you can recognize that even when things aren't ideal around you, but you can still find this place in yourself to anchor your emotions, that's when you can recognize what authentic happiness is about. Because when I'm very fortunate. I live in a beautiful part of the Hamburg here in Germany, and when I go out into nature, which is right in basically my backyard, and the sun shining, and I can just find so much joy in those moments, right? And so sure, those are conditions, but I still see people walking. I encounter people with this frown on their face, or this scowl, and I think, look around, how can you not be happy? And so that again just comes back to the way they're framing it. They're so lost in their thoughts and some other moment that they're ruminating on, that they aren't capitalizing on this opportunity to be happy, right? And so when you recognize you are often standing in your own way of being happy, I think that is when that's a very liberating moment, because then just in the same way that when I learned to meditate, I realized that I can't stop my thoughts, but I can control what I give my attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do the same thing in everyday life. And so you'll realize that a big part of happiness is that you're focusing on the wrong things. Excuse me. You're giving your attention to the things that aren't supporting your happiness. And a lot of times the things that support your happiness will also support your success in life, whether it's success in your relationships or your workplace or anything that you do. And so they're all kind of intertwined. And so that's why I find happiness is also this great barometer for, are we living in a way that's authentic and in alignment with what we really need?
Mm-hmm. You talked about the airline and the mask coming down and put it on yourself and everything. And I completely agree, completely understand that. I was just having a conversation with my mom today. And she was we were talking about my oldest going to college. And I was like, I really want him to have a good experience. I really want him to have the things that I didn't have when I was his age. And I'm trying to provide that the best that I can. And it's really, we were just talking about kind of the difficulty, some very specific things that I'm dealing with right now. And she kind of had this moment of like, you can only do what's in your control, right? Like you can't control whether or not he enjoys his college experience, and you can't control if he gets into housing. Like it's not something that you can control. And it's hard because being a parent, being a caregiver comes with this sense of like, I need to do for you. How can someone pursue happiness for themselves? How can they put on that oxygen mask for themselves without feeling a little bit selfish?
Yeah, I think, well, that's the point I was just trying to make, was that it's not, well, how can you stop from feeling selfish? That's your own job on how you want to frame it. But
Mm.
I think it's a really important point that people feel like it's very self-indulgent to pursue
Mm-hmm.
happiness. Um, when you can frame it in a way that, the happier I am, the more I'm going to, it'll be contagious. The more I will make choices that are going to be better for me and for other people. It's a win-win. When you find your optimum level of happiness, or when you are able to put together many moments of happiness throughout each day, you will be in a far better position to give to others. And it will. I remember having, I was at a company that I was working at, and one of the people on my team, she was a finance manager, and she said her nickname for me was Mr. Positive, right? So I found a way to, in finding my own positivity and satisfaction and joy, I had that contagious effect on someone else. And so that's why it's not something that is that is selfish. I think it is something that is actually um, going to benefit everyone around you. I mean, think about it. Do you enjoy being around miserable people? Do you that are struggling to be happy? When you will find that you will have more to give, and you will gravitate to people will gravitate to you towards you to try and get some of whatever you've got. And so I think it's a very positive thing to find ways to be happy for yourself. And as I said, you also will make better choices, and which also means being less selfish in the way that you interact with other people, right? So I think it all kind of combines to have a positive net effect on people.
I know up until this point we've really talked about happiness being this, like, you're choosing to view it that way, and you're kind of making sure that you're seeing those moments in life as this is what happiness is aligning with and everything. What about folks who are struggling with trauma or chronic pain or mental illness? Is there some way to maybe frame it differently, where it's not that happiness is really that choice, but if you're struggling with some very specific things, are there still those chances to be happy?
I think with any choices that we make in life, in order to make the best possible choices, you need to put yourself in the right state. And so if you are if you haven't dealt with past trauma, or you are feeling depressed, and it doesn't even need to be chronic depression, um, obviously you are not going to be able to see all the options and opportunities there for you.
Mm.
So it's very difficult to say to someone who's experiencing anxiety or depression, or some other thing that's limiting their mental well-being, to just choose to be happy. I don't
Mhm.
believe that's possible. But what you can do is start making choices that will create more happiness in yourself. You can start making choices to, I made the choice to go to therapy when on the days I was feeling strong enough to go, because I was at a point where I struggled to leave my apartment. I struggled to get out of bed in the morning, and I felt so ashamed. I thought I had this chronic laziness. Obviously, in that state, you can't just choose to be happy.
Mhm.
But what you can do then is, once you find ways and you develop the tools to modify your state, to put yourself in a different state. And a lot of that has to do with, that's a lot of the work that I do, is helping people develop new beliefs about themselves, about the world. That is a big piece. Learning to choose different thoughts. Those are choices you can make, and then the feedback will be more happiness, right? So that's why I don't think you can just choose to be happy. I don't think that's authentic. I think that can be very superficial. But when you can start doing the inner work that will then help you make choices that lead to more happy outcomes, that's the process. And it's not necessarily an easy one, right?
Mhm.
So people will look for the easy route, or they'll distract themselves and they think that's happiness. They'll do the shopping, or they'll use alcohol or drugs, or they will spend a lot of time dreaming about some future but never taking action. Those are all just distractions. If you're willing to do the work in the moment, and know that you're building towards a happier life that way, that's the only real authentic way to get there. And I think when you also talking about happiness in terms of it's not just these moments when we're feeling relaxed and easy, and those are easy times to be happy. But we also what also fulfills us is are these challenges that we overcome. Some of the things that really fulfill us are these things that we struggled with and we thought were terrible at the time. Um, but then once we overcome them, we just feel more empowered. We feel a greater sense of courage, and I think those are the things that will then lead to more consistent happiness as well. When people talk about getting into the flow state, that's when you kind of lose yourself in the things you're doing. There's two really critical components. One is it has to be challenging enough so that your brain doesn't get bored, and the other piece is that it has to fulfill you in some way. It has to, the guy, the psychologist who kind of coined the term flow. His name's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me to spell it, but he's a Hungarian American psychologist, and he talks about how happiness is a component of getting into that flow state. So it's the combination of finding something that makes you happy in the doing of it, and he even talks about it in terms of just you can make a game out of it or do something that makes it fun, and then combine it with your challenges. So happiness is not just about making it easy, just the stuff that makes you that's pleasurable. It's also rising to the challenge and you just doing things that challenge you and make you feel stronger, make you feel good about yourself, make you recognize your own potential. All of those things will help give that happiness feedback that I was talking about.
How do you guide someone who says, that's great, but I don't even know what's going to make me happy anymore?
Yeah, that's why I really encouraged people to define it for themselves. But when we get down to it, a lot of times, what is making people unhappy are their own beliefs and thoughts. So it's really hard to be happy when all of your thoughts are negative, right? So I think it's about raising your level of awareness. One of my coaching mottos is awareness allows change. And so that's through the coaching process. I ask a lot of questions because the answers are within you. Nobody can tell you how to get to happiness or what it means for you. And so first of all, it's about taking the time to reflect. There are lots of easy things that you can do on a day-to-day basis that will give you more opportunities to be happy, right? So in the same way that you might, if you're wanting to live a healthier lifestyle, you'll look at your diet and your exercise regime or something like that. In the same way, are you living a healthy a lifestyle that's going to allow you to be happier? So, and that includes: am I watching too much news? Am I watching too much? Am I doom scrolling? Am I hanging out with people who are always complaining and negative? Right. So you can create the environment for yourself, and so that's why when we look at the choices we're making, we will choose to spend time with certain people or expose ourselves to certain influences and information, and then taking an inventory and asking ourselves, is this really making me happy? And then when it comes to our thinking, we can, complaining is a habit. We can have so much, but we focus on the little bit that we're missing in life. And so that's why a regular practice of gratitude is something that I've found made a huge difference in my life. So there's lots of little, you might call them hacks, but I find they're just healthy habits for creating more happiness in your life.
Yeah. You brought up the doom scrolling and too much news and curating your feed is a huge thing right now because these algorithms that are on all these different apps that we're all doom scrolling on, hopefully not too much. Hopefully, you've limited it some. You can put timers and stuff on your apps if you need to limit it. But they're catered, they're designed to draw you in. They're designed to keep you scrolling. And so if you have a feed that is making you unhappy, I hear it a lot about Twitter. They're like, oh, Twitter's a cesspool. I open my Twitter and it's nothing but positivity. It's nothing but people supporting one another because I have curated it so closely that it is a good space for me. And if something negative sneaks in, I'm like, who do I need to unfollow? Because this is not it. This is not where I'm trying to be right now on my Twitter experience. But you have to, it's a very
Exactly.
it's a conscious effort to do that right now because there are these algorithms and all of these programs are using that to just really get their hooks into you and draw you in and get you to engage in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes that's a negative
Yeah.
engagement. So you got to watch it.
Absolutely. And our brains are wired for that. I mean, there's a reason why good newspapers and networks don't work because we're not drawn to the, we're looking for the things we have to fear, that we have to watch out for to keep ourselves safe. That's the way our brain is wired. So if we limit our exposure to that, we'll feel a lot better. I remember when I left Canada, I backpacked through Asia for 6 months, and I didn't have a lot of access to the news or anything. And I realized, I mean, obviously, not working and just seeing the world and stuff, that's going to help with your happiness
Yeah.
for sure. But I found that when I got back to to everyday life, and I didn't get myself a television, I didn't I didn't watch any news. And I didn't find I was, people would tell me things, so I didn't find I was massively uninformed, but I certainly noticed that I felt a lot better. And then when I get my teeth into a topic someone would tell me about, and I'd watch YouTube videos on it, and I could really feel the difference when I was exposing myself to negative news, negative input on a regular basis. And so I think that's just good about a good housekeeping thing about recognizing how much time am I spending talking about or exposing myself to negative topics that undermine my happiness. I think that's just, and that's in your control to change, right?
Yeah. It is a balance though between I want to know what's going on and how much is too much, but that's another one. You just got to kind of define that for yourself. And
exactly, you can be informed, but you don't have to be inundated. Like nobody's asking you to give a press release. Well, for most people, on some topic that you're spending hours and hours looking at. And I think that's where self-reflection comes in. It's recognizing when the things you're doing aren't making you feel good, and so spending less time doing that. I mean, it comes down to being as easy as that sometimes.
I want to flip this a little bit and ask, is there such a thing as too much focus on happiness? Can it become toxic? You've heard the term toxic positivity. So kind of down that vein, or can it become performative even?
Absolutely. And I think that happiness is not putting your head in the sand and not looking at any of the bad things in the world or around you. It's having a good awareness of, okay, these are things that I don't like, so I'm going to change them. It comes back to what you said about, you can't control, you can only change what you control. And I think it was the philosopher Epictetus talked about how, the only thing you can really control is your thoughts and your beliefs, the things that you believe and the thoughts that you focus on. I think you can control a few more things in life, but those are some fundamental ones. So when your expectations are that that you need to be happy all the time, that can be a problem for you, obviously. And so when there's too much focus on happiness, because as I said, happiness is more of this byproduct. It's this feedback that we're getting from life. And so when you're constantly focused on your levels of happiness, it will come to you when you're living an authentic life, when you're living according to the things that are good for you, that make you feel good, when you do your mental health checks, when you have good habits in your day-to-day life, happiness will come. So that goes back to making happiness the outcome or the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? So taking that away and being less focused on what you call happiness and be more focused on, am I living in alignment with, the authentic part of me, the needs that I have, and the things that I know make me feel better, make me feel physically and mentally stronger. And I think when we take the time to reflect rather than looking at a lot of it, so much of it is about being willing to go inward rather than looking for these external cues, like how many likes have I got, or what's the feedback that I'm getting, very relevant to what we were just talking about, but also am I achieving the same things as my, as people around me?
Mm,
The competition is never with other people. It's only with who you were yesterday, right? So if you're continuing to grow, that's going to be, continue to grow, evolve, and fulfill yourself is going to give you way more happiness than any of those other things like impressing other people. And that sounds like, that's difficult in our society for people to do,
yeah.
right? But you can do it in small steps and small increments. And then the more you realize that the things that really make you happy are not the things that we're told through social media or we're told through advertising. That's why I always come back to this: define what it. Start to investigate, do experiments. I mean, that's one thing about living in a complex world. The solutions are done systemically, and the way you find the solutions is by making little experiments, right? Trying out little things, and then when you find something that works, integrate it into your life. And it's these building blocks, right? So there's no one easy solution. You need to find the definitions that work for you, and then find the little hacks and the daily habits, and then put all those pieces together, and that's going to create more happiness in your life. But saying, okay, I need more happiness in my life, therefore I'm going to do these things, and that externalizes it, and it's got to be that inside job.
Yeah. I think it's also really easy, going back to the social media bit a little bit, because it's real easy to look at things like Facebook and Instagram, and you do see those moments of other people's happiness. And it's real easy to compare and be like, oh, I need something to post like that. I've got a friend who decided that this year, for 365 days, he is going to post every single day. And I'm like, that's great. And I was worried whenever he first said that, because I was like, oh no, how fake are his posts gonna get? But he's kept it pretty real. He's kept it pretty real. He's like,
Great.
boy, that storm woke me up last night. That's the post. And I think we have it's such a warped reality right now, because you go on and you just see all the happy moments or all the pictures and stuff. Like I almost exclusively post pictures of my kids and pictures or quotes of things that they've said that are funny, because they're just gold mines for funny stuff that they say. But yeah, it's real easy to look at that and go, oh, her life looks great, because I'm not going to post when it's shit, like it's just not reality.
No, and we've all seen people who, for their selfie, they got the big smile, and as soon as they're not taking the selfie, they're back to,
Yeah.
and they're not nearly as, putting out this happy vibe. And I think we always, and celebrity is this great example of, we see these people living these supposedly great lives, and I've worked with and I've known from celebrities to wealthy people, and I can tell you that they are not any happier. And if anything, this pressure for they feel to how they should feel, or being so externally controlled, or having to put on this inauthentic self for other people, that makes people really unhappy. Or people who are wealthy who think that people will think that money is going to lead them to more happiness. Certainly if you're struggling for money, that it's harder to be happy. But certainly if you get to a certain place in your life, getting that extra 10 grand a year, or getting that nicer car or whatever, that's not going to incrementally make you any happier.
Mm-hmm.
And the research has been done on that. So I think when when those sad cases, when you see people who seem to have it all, whether the musicians or actors or whatever, and you see that they've got the celebrity, the fame, the money, and yet they take their own lives, that is just a perfect example of, it's not what it seems. And
Yeah.
and it's the same for social media. People are putting on their best face, they're showing you their peak experiences. And again, I go back to happiness is not about those peak experiences. It's
Mm-hmm.
what you do in between, that's going to create overall more happiness in your life.
Definitely. And we've talked about the external things don't necessarily matter, but are there external things that matter?
Well, that's going to be different for everyone. Obviously, I gave the Viktor Frankl example, and those are conditions it's really difficult. So when there are we talked about control what you can control,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously environment is an important one. It's really difficult to be happy when, like when I look back now and I realize all the things that affect depression, for example. You can, if you're dehydrated, it can affect your depression. Your diet, if you have an unhealthy microbiome, that can affect your level of happiness or depression. And so there are lots of external things that you can control.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then again, we go back to what are you exposing yourself to, and it can be difficult. When you have a set of friends or you have family that you feel committed to. Some people, you need to limit the amount of time you spend with them because they don't support your happiness, and you can be there for them, and you can still. I'm not asking people to cut off people out of their lives, although for some that may be
Sometimes it's
necessary.
necessary. Yeah.
But it's just recognizing, okay, um, what level of exposure to these people is going to can I work with, right? So certainly you will know the things that affect your happiness. Again, working on it, looking at it as a feedback mechanism. So when you consistently recognize that spending a lot of time with these people or spending a lot of time doing this activity is really not making me happy, then why do you keep doing it? People
Mm-hmm.
think they've invested so much time in relationships or in doing a hobby or whatever, learning a skill, but if it's not making you happy, why would you continue? We have a limited amount of time on this earth, and so when people feel like they've made a commitment to whether maybe it's learning something, they're getting an education, and I'm not saying that as soon as we're not happy with something we should quit. But when you look at over a period of time that consistently this is not getting any better, this is not making me any happier, it's time to reevaluate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you need to evaluate every minute of every day, because obviously you have mood swings. There's so much that affects us, from being hungry to not getting enough sleep, and so those are the things you can control. Obviously, it's really difficult to find more happiness if you're not getting enough sleep, because that can definitely affect your mood. And so look at the lifestyle choices that you're making and make sure that physically, so it's this combination of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. I talk about, for some people who kind of shy away from that word, look at it from the emotional sort of center, right? So when you look at those three areas and make sure those are properly taken care of, then you'll be in a better position to be happy. And so those are the things that I think, the controllables that you can try and control.
Mm-hmm. There's also there are people who make you happy, right? There's people who being around them, it's not that they are responsible for making you happy, but the other day we were watching, what show we were watching some show. It was Supernatural, and they were talking about everyone's version of heaven. And my nephew happened to be over, and he said, what would your version of heaven be? And I was like, you know what? It would be one of our family lunches, because every month we get the whole extended family together in one place, and we have these lunches and we celebrate whatever needs to be celebrated. Easter was just recently. We also had birthdays on that one. And so it's just like whatever is happening that month, whoever's birthday it's been, we just get together, and it's just a big, half a day of being together and celebrating. And it's the conversations that are happening and the shared inside jokes and everything from whenever all of us were growing up together and all of that. It's like, those are the kind of moments where I find a lot of happiness. And if the people weren't there, it wouldn't necessarily be as happy. So I think also it can be real easy to say, like, okay, well, maybe it's a person that's a problem, but maybe it's a person that you could spend more time with too. It could be the other direction.
Exactly. Well, that's just it. It's not about what you remove. Sometimes it's what you add.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's what you remove. But I love that example that you gave, because I think about, I've been blessed to have done some amazing things in my life and traveled the world and lived amazing experiences. But I'm on my second marriage, and the time that I have an 11-year-old in my life, and we just had the best moments are when I get along great with my in-laws. So my wife's family comes over, her parents, her sister, and we have these lunches or dinners, and we'll play board games, or we'll do these, and they're just such simple moments, and
Yeah.
yet I wouldn't trade them for anything. And even when I compare, there's no comparing to these other moments I've had. Those were great too, but just that connection that you feel with others. So when you talk about other people making you happy, it's less about is that what you experience in their presence,
Yeah.
that connection you feel to them, and the love, whether it's just things you have in common, but there's just that the energy they have or whatever. So I'm glad you put that caveat in. It's not making other people responsible for your happiness, because that's something that I really learned out of my first marriage, is that you can't make someone else happy. So, and I can tell you for myself, when I was feeling depressed, there was nobody in the world that was going to be able to make me happy. So giving someone that responsibility is a sure way to undermine your own happiness. And also just recognizing that you can't do it for someone else. You can be there for them, you can support them, and you can spend more time with people who you have a real connection with. But at the end of the day, it's not that other person. It's the connection, the bond that you feel, the circumstances that you're in. That's that feedback that you're getting, that, oh yeah, this is the right situation for me.
Yeah. Boy, those first marriages will teach you some shit.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm super grateful for that experience too. So, some people will feel bitter about things that went wrong, but everything, even though I may have not liked it in the moment, everything has helped me grow and become who I am now, and I'm happy with who I am. So I think that's the way to frame it for yourself.
Most definitely. I got my 11-year-old out of it. That's great.
Yeah, great.
I learned a lot. And I learned what I don't want to go back to. Put it that way.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. That's what contrast does for our life.
Absolutely.
If you how would you know what darkness is if you without light, or if you've never experienced fear or unhappiness? Like, these contrasts in our lives, they teach us so much, and so I find great value in them.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about your book and your coaching approach. What makes those two things stand out from the rest of the books and the coaching on happiness?
Yeah, well, there's lots of great coaches out there and who have different or similar approaches. Maybe I think to start on the book, a lot of people will get self-help books or inspiring books because they're looking for some answers. They're looking for someone to tell them, this is what I have to do to achieve this thing. And in my book, in each chapter, I look at life and happiness from different perspectives, so that people can to encourage people to reflect. And then each chapter has a set of questions for people to reflect, because the answers, my coaching philosophy is that the answers are, each person has the answers within them. So any answer that I'm going to give you is not going to be perfect for you. The answer that you need is within you. My job is to help you find it, to help navigate you there. And so that's what I do in the book. For each chapter, and for all these different topics that I feel contribute to people's happiness or lack of it, there's these questions to help people reflect, and it's all about raising their level of awareness, and that's the approach that I take. So not everybody's happy with that. They want the hack, or the
answer,
the magic, the magic exercise or the answer. That's not the way the book works. But at the end, you'll find, once you've gone through the processes, and if you look at it as more of a workbook where you take in all these different perspectives, okay, that gives me maybe a different way of looking at it, and then you ask yourself these questions, that is going to help you find the answer for yourself. It's just like, the whole parable of, give a person a fish, you'll feed them for a day, teach them to fish, they'll feed them for a lifetime. And that's what I aspire to do. I aspire people to get the tools, and certainly I have tools and I have processes in the book that will help people find more happiness and navigate their lives. But at the end of the day, the answers are within them, and I aspire to help people navigate their way to those answers. So that's the approach in the book, and that's very similar to the approach that I use in my coaching. Yeah. And look, again, I focus a lot on, because for me, what made the biggest change was changing a lot of my beliefs, because we develop,
Mm.
from the time we were old enough to think, we were developing these beliefs about ourselves and the world and our place in it. And so most of us don't think of ourselves as philosophers, but basically we've built this philosophy that we have, and we're not even aware of it. And it's driving our strategies in life, and it's driving so many of the outcomes. And we wonder why we can continue to come back to these different these outcomes that we don't want. And a lot of times it'll be because what we believe, and then the thinking habits that we've developed from there. Those are the things that are keeping us stuck. Most people who are trying to overcome a problem starts with them, and we overcome that, and then the other problems become easy to solve, right? So that's the approach that I take with coaching, and that's what I've found the most success with. So
Yeah, it's it's neat to say like the answer is in your hands, right? Because I think
yeah.
a lot of self-help books do try to bottom line it and say, here's the only thing you're gonna, if you want to know what the answer is, get to chapter 37 and we'll get there. Or, doctors hate this one trick. So you gotta just kind of make sure that you're applying it to yourself. And that goes with a lot of different self-help books as well, and a lot of different strategies. You got to customize it to yourself and take what works for you too. I've read many books where it's like, oh, I really like this one piece of it. And it's okay to say,
Yeah,
I'm going to take that one piece with me. That's mine now. Thanks.
exactly. Exactly. And the thing is, what I really stay away from is telling people they have to, they must, they should
Mm-hmm.
do these things. I offer opportunities, and I just think choice is such an important thing. If it resonates with you, choose that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm giving you, here's a selection of things that you can do, choose, and that's the most empowering thing that you can do. If you do it because you think I'm an expert who's going to give you yeah, and then it doesn't work out for you, that's not the way it's meant to work. It's meant to go, okay, look, and trust your inner guidance system in the same way that happiness is part of that guidance system. I'm a big believer in intuition. It's part of one of my chapters about the foundation of my philosophy. We have so much wisdom within us, if we would only listen to it and tap into it and access it. But that takes a level of self-awareness, and it takes doing the work. And
Yeah.
and a lot of us are just still very externally driven, and we don't trust that part of us. And that is a process in itself. So I think trusting yourself and listening to your inner guidance is a big component of finding more happiness.
Yeah. What's one small mindset shift that someone could try today if they're feeling a little bit stuck or a little bit unhappy?
Well, mindset is a big one, because mindsets are kind of the script we live by, and that really affect our strategies. But one thing to help us cope with some, I've talked a lot about thinking habits, and one of the things that I like to do is easy ways to shift people's thinking. And I work with affirmations, and sometimes when I say that, people will roll their eyes and they think, yeah, well, it doesn't help me just to hear positive things in the morning to a soundtrack, or to tell myself things I don't really believe in the mirror. And that's such a key thing. I focus very much on, when you find you have a topic, or you have some thoughts that reoccur that are very negative, that are bringing you down, that are affecting your happiness, I'll look at those, and we'll create one statement that contradicts those, that counters those
Mm.
negative thoughts. And the important thing is, it needs to be believable to you. So if it's a affirmation that says I'm really great, or I'm wealthy, or I'm amazing at this, but you don't really believe it, you need to frame it in a way that's, well, I know it's possible for me, or however you want to do it, but it needs to be believable to you. It needs to be said in the positive. So it's not, I don't do this, or this doesn't happen. It needs to be affirming the positive. And it needs to be, formulated in words that resonate with you. So, and it should be framed in the present. So when you have that statement for yourself, anytime you're getting these negative thoughts that you're about this topic, you have your affirmation, and you just repeat it to yourself again and again. And then it'll fade, and then it'll come back, and you have that in your back pocket, and you start repeating that with it. If you do that consistently over 30 days, you'll find that topic or that group of thoughts will stop coming to you, because your brain is like, I like to give the metaphor of, imagine you're walking through the forest, and you want to, you want to take a new path. It's going to take a while for you to walk that path in, but if you keep walking that path, eventually the other one will grow over. And that's the way with the neurons in your brain firing together and creating these pathways. The more you think a thought, the stronger that pathway in your brain. And then you start thinking other thoughts, that then weakens, and you strengthen another pathway. And that's why this repetitive focusing on what you want, what your strengths are, and so on, because your brain will tell you all these things that you need to be aware of, that could be dangerous, all these fear-based things. And that's great that it's trying to keep you safe, but it's not showing you the solutions. It's not showing the things that are going to get you where you want to go. And so when you can take control of those, that's one of those hacks that I find people most often tell me is super helpful, has really changed their thinking. And you can use it, apply it to so many things. If you're having trouble sleeping because you're worried about something, you can use that. If you have something that puts you in a negative mindset, or that causes you to make negative choices, you can use that affirmation to help change that frame of thinking in order to find new options and make new choices. So that's something that I find super helpful.
Now, do you recommend getting really specific with that? Like if you're struggling with one specific group of thoughts, do you recommend specifically targeting that for 30 days and then updating it every 30 days? Or how do you usually recommend that?
Yeah, I think it's topic specific. Like I find the more general it is, the less effective it is.
That's what I was thinking.
You have so many, you have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day. And so, and most of them, a lot of them are negative and they're repetitive. So it's about finding the things that are, pick one topic that's negatively affecting you now and make a statement that refers to that. And the more specific, the better, and then once you have that success, and don't start with the most difficult ones, right? Start with something. And then once you have success, build on that. And then you'll find some of the most stressful things, the things you worry about a lot, you'll find you'll massively be able to reduce that, which will in turn reduce your level of anxiety. It'll improve your sleep. It'll do so many things. And then if you do that in conjunction with a meditation practice and so on, like those kind of things will really, really improve your quality of life.
Yeah. Bite Mark would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
I would have to say the one that I find most inspiring, that and don't ask me to quote it because I haven't read it in a while. I'm terrible at about misquoting, but Kipling's poem, it's simply titled "If," and for me, it really talks about if you you become and live the most optimal version of yourself, regardless of the circumstances, then you will, then that's the path to pursue. And I found it a super inspiring poem. And actually, the actor Michael Caine referred to it years ago, and that's what got me onto it. And ever since, if I'm feeling down, I'll have a look at it, and it'll remind me of what I'm working towards.
Yeah, it really is a great poem, and it's not super long either. I just linked it, so if you haven't read or heard this poem, I recommend going. It'll take you 2 minutes. 2 minutes, easy.
Very inspiring.
Yes, and it's really
absolutely.
good. What is your favorite life hack?
I have so many. I could fill my whole day with the, if I didn't have people in my life and work to do, I could fill my day with lots of different hacks. I find that what's really important for me is having a morning ritual and an evening ritual. But for me, in the morning, how you start your day is such an important day. It lays the foundation for how the rest of your day will go. So there's two things that I do every day, and that's a meditation, whether it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes, somewhere in that. And then getting some form of exercise or getting myself in motion, whether it's just walking the dog or whether it's doing some yoga in the morning. So that combination of getting my mind right, getting my body into motion, that sets the stage for having a great day. And so, I recommend for everyone to find some kind of a morning ritual, and not just and certainly not just having your coffee and reading the news. That's probably not going to set the stage for the most optimistic day for you.
Yeah, That's me though. Well, not news. I try not to look at the news. I did.
Yeah, I mean, having your coffee, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the things you connect with it, like if you've got CNN running all day or whatever, it's these are the things that if you start your day with those, certainly find the point in the day if you want to read the news where you're in the best, strongest state possible, not when you're in an emotionally vulnerable state. That's not the time to be watching the news.
Yeah, for sure. I did have to like set a rule for myself. I've set many rules for myself about social media. I don't follow all of them, but I set them. But I did have to kind of like dial it back a little because I was just starting that scroll real early in the day. And so I had to set like okay, you can be on your phone and check your messages and all that because I use my phone for work. But no social media before coffee is my own rule. And it works out.
You know what's good for you.
Yeah. It works for me. Exactly. So that's what matters.
Perfect.
Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. If you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception surrounding mental illness or talking about mental health, what would it be?
It would be the way, I remember when I first understood what depression was, and I thought it was, a chemical imbalance in the brain. I think for people to recognize it's not this thing that some people have more of a propensity to mental health issues than others, but it's not something that you're just genetically predispositioned to, that you can't change. I think it's really important that people recognize that there are so many things you can do to improve your mental health. It's not something you're stuck with, and it's not something that you necessarily need to take a pill for. For some people, pharmaceuticals are a great way to overcome their most difficult times. So I'm not saying it's you shouldn't, but what I'm saying is that that's not going to be the cure. And so for people to recognize that a lot of things around mental health are everything from your environment to the philosophy or the beliefs that you developed and everything in between. And I think recognizing that it's far more than just this thing that's going on chemically in your brain is, that misconception would help people engage with so many more helpful solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any remaining community questions. Folks who are here, feel free to pop anything in. I'm also going to post your socials one more time. So if you guys are looking to connect with Peter, be sure you go on to, we've got website, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And you know what I always say, engagement is what really matters. So if you go on there and you give them a follow, make sure you like a couple posts, leave a comment on a post, any of those things to help that discoverability and feed that algorithm with more positive people. So make sure you do all of that. And while I am posting those, Peter, I will just turn it over to you. And if there's anything we didn't get to talk about or any resources you want to throw out there, I'll just give you the floor for a minute while I do this post.
Absolutely. Well, I think first of all, if people want to read my blog, it's obviously a free access, and I write it because I want to share a wide variety of things that I encounter in my coaching practice and in daily life or in the personal development stuff that I read, the research that I read. So that's something, if you want inspiration or you're looking for the hacks we've talked about, feel free to read my blog. And I think the one thing that I like to always remind people of is that don't believe everything that you think. A lot of times, we have this inner narrator that gives commentary on our life and on ourselves, and a lot of times it's not true. So just remember, just because you've thought it doesn't make it true. And when you start to question that, and you find some clarity that way, you'll find the way forward to happiness is a lot clearer for you.
I like that. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions, so I will just say thank you so much for being here for this conversation. It was absolutely wonderful, and I hope that it reaches many, many people who need to hear it. So thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
That's a wrap on this episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. Huge thanks to Peter for such a thoughtful, honest conversation about what happiness actually is and what it isn't. If you're still sitting with some of what we talked about, like the idea that happiness is feedback, not a destination, you're not alone. I think a lot of us have been trained to look outside ourselves for that feeling.
to chase it, schedule it, earn it, or wait for someone else to give it to us. But as Peter said, it doesn't work that way. What does work is getting clear on your core values, paying attention to the small stuff, and being real with yourself about the things that are and are not working in your life. That doesn't mean you're going to feel amazing every day. It means you have a compass you can actually use when things get messy. And let's be honest, life gets messy a lot. One thing I hope you take from this conversation is that you don't have to earn your right to feel joy. You don't need perfect circumstances, and you definitely don't need to perform your happiness for other people. If you are struggling right now, you are not broken, you are human. And it's okay to start small. Peter's Post-it note exercise is a great way to begin. It's simple, and it can give you a clearer picture of what actually matters to you, not just what you've been told to care about. We also touched on how important it is to watch what you're feeding your brain, who you follow, what media you're consuming, the people you surround yourself with. All of that shapes how you see the world and your place in it. And it's okay to be protective of your peace. That's survival. It is not selfish. If you are looking to make some connections with people who are there for you, feel free to tie into our community. Go to tacosfallapart.com, click on the contact page, find all the ways to connect in with the community and with me on socials. I'm MommaFoxFire everywhere. Search for Even Tacos Fall Apart and MommaFoxFire, you'll find me. And join the Discord. It's one of the places where we really get into that supportive environment. If this episode resonated with you, please take a second to like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you are listening. It really does help more people find us, and it keeps me bringing you real, honest conversations about mental health, pain, healing, and growth. And remember, even tacos fall apart, and we still love them, and I still love you. See you next time.